Hello, writers, and welcome to our 7th unit, Band 1, Session 2, Writing Story Adaptations That Hold Together. Let's revisit our last session. Let's start today by thinking about some of the things we realized last session. When writers adapt fairy tales, what do they change? And more importantly, why do they make those changes? We notice two big changes authors tend to make. They change the characters and they change the events. Will you look over your notes and think to yourself about why the author made the adaptations he or she made? Now turn and tell your partner or your group or your table mates, or whisper it into your hands if you don't have any of those, some of the reasons why, not some of the things they did, but some of the reasons why you think an author might alter an original fairy tale, making an adaptation of it. Go. Writers, maybe some of you are talking about the fact that when a writer makes one change, say changing Cinderella from a girl to a boy, that one change changes other things, right? Let's think of some other examples in Prince Cinders. So some of the things that change in Prince Cinders from the original Cinderella. The author changes from a girl Cinderella to a boy Prince Cinders. Prince Cinders lost his pants instead of a glass slipper. And so because of that, the princess searched for someone to fit the pants instead of a prince searching for a shoe. And that led to men trying on pairs of pants. And eventually that led to Prince Cinders trying the pants on and fitting into them. So writers, am I right that you are thinking the first big change the author makes, say turning Cinderella into a boy, is like a domino that falls over and pushes other things to change? So let's take a look at the Three Little Pigs. What if we decided that too often the main characters in fairy tales are farm animals? And for children everywhere to enjoy fairy tales, it would be better if the characters were, household pets that city kids as well as farm kids might know about. So if the pigs were, say, hamsters, would they still build houses? Would it still be a big bad wolf that terrorized them? How might those changes affect a story like The Three Little Pigs? Turn and talk for a moment and think about the changes that might result if you change the pigs to hamsters. want to teach you that when writers plan how an adaptation of a story will go, they do two things. First, they decide on a change that they think will improve the story. Second, they make sure the change leads to other changes so the whole story fits together. Often, the one big adaptation cascades like a row of dominoes through the writer's adaptation of the fairy tale. So let's see if we can add to our chart how to write a fairy tale adaptation. Know the classic story and tell it often. We've been practicing this. Decide on a change to improve the story and make the change lead to other changes. In our last session, you chose from Little Red Riding Hood or the Three Billy Goats Gruff. Remember which one you chose? If not, check your writer's notebook. Today, I'm going to write an adaptation of Cinderella, and I'm hoping you can help me. So, before a person can think about a possible adaptation, it helps to have the original in mind. So, I'm going to list in my mind the main things that happen in Cinderella. Okay, so Cinderella is mistreated by her stepmother and her stepsisters. An invitation comes to a ball at the palace, and they tell Cinderella, by they, her stepsisters, that she has to get them ready for the ball. And then they make her stay home, cleaning the ashes out of the fireplace. And a fairy godmother gives Cinderella a fancy dress and a fancy pumpkin carriage, so she looks like a fancy princess. But don't forget that magic will go away at midnight. Cinderella goes to the ball and dances with the prince. At the stroke of midnight, she runs out, leaving a glass slipper, which the prince finds. And the prince searches for the owner. He finds Cinderella, and they get married and live happily ever after. Now comes the hard part. We need to think, what is an important way in which we could change the elements of this story to make it better? I usually start by thinking, is there a part or an aspect of the story that I don't really agree with the way it is now? Is there a reason to change the story? Will you join me in doing this work first with Cinderella? Because I'm not going to lie, it is hard work and I would love your help. Then you can try it with your fairy tale. So take a moment now and think, what is a reason to change the story? What is not so great in the story? What would you change? Go ahead, turn and talk. So here are some thoughts I had on Cinderella. I I mean, isn't it great to have a story where the one and only thing a girl wants is to go to the ball and marry the right man? No, I mean, maybe, just maybe, we want a more powerful girl. I mean, who cares if she has the fanciest dress or goes in the fanciest pumpkin carriage? I kind of feel like that teaches bad values, like money and stuff are the only important things. I'm kind of thinking maybe we can change what Cinderella wants. So maybe instead of wishing to go to the ball and to marry the handsome prince, maybe she just wants, let's think. Maybe she wants to not just get married to a rich guy, but maybe she wants to save dolphins. We just did a ton of work on animals, or open a library, or give to the homeless. And if we decide, for example, that the invitation, okay, would be to go to a meeting to plan a new library, not a silly old ball, then we'd need to decide if Cinderella's job was to get the mean stepsisters ready for that meeting about the library, or I don't know, maybe they wouldn't even want to go. And we need to decide if she needed a fancy car and dress. See those dominoes starting to fall? All those chain reactions because we're changing what she might want. I mean, maybe she just needs a bike to get to the library. So do you see that first you think about a way to improve the original story? Someone could decide to change a fairy tale because they thought the fairy tales too often are set in the country, so maybe they decide to write a city version. In our Cinderella story, we changed what Cinderella wanted. And maybe someone changes the type of animal in the fairy tale. All of these lead to the dominoes falling down. So let's take a look at our ways authors adapt fairy tales chart again. They can change the character, maybe from a girl to a boy, or from a fancy godmother to a less fancy one. Like we said too, maybe changing the type of animal. Changing the events, sometimes maybe from something old-fashioned to something modern, maybe from something rich and fancy to something more people can relate to. Think about what your reader might want to read about. And sometimes we change the motivation, and that was really the work we just did together with Cinderella. And maybe from wanting more money and power to wanting to do good in the world. So now it's your turn. The first thing you're going to do is what I did. You're going to stop and jot the important events in your story. You do have access to the text if you need to go back, but I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that walkthrough I just did, where you are just retelling the classic version. Off you go. All right, writers, now that you've jotted down those important events in your classic story, it's time to turn and talk and think about your story with someone nearby. And to really ask these important and hard questions, like we did together with Cinderella. What don't you love about your fairy tale, and how might you change it? By the end of your conversation, I want you to be able to stop and jot that big change in your notebook. Off you go, writers. Writers, I'm going to pull you back together for a minute. You are doing such a great job, and I am so impressed. You are deciding on really meaningful changes to deal with. Big changes in characters, settings, goals, problems. You name it, you've said it. So now in your writer's notebook, it's time to plan. But don't write out your whole story. Just start to plan it in a bit by bit way. And I've included some sentence starters you can use to help you. So you'll see a spot here to try this plan sheet. In my story, there will be a character named. Who is your main character or main characters going to be? Like in the classic story, he or she will still. What is going to stay the same? When the story starts, I am thinking he or she will. How might you start your story? And the setting will be. Get that setting strong in your mind. All right, writers, go start planning. Writers, I'm going to pause you here. I want to remind you that good writers plan, and they plan again and again. So after you've planned once, think about it. And I want you to try a different organizer to help you plan. I have 2 other ones for you to try, even just a blank one. Or you can think through your character setting, your problem, and your resolution. Maybe you can just even write your events down on sticky notes, and that'll let you be able to reorder them as necessary. But either way, we're going to try planning for our story a second time. Off you go, writers. writers, I'm going to stop all of you again for a minute. In our next session, you will begin actually writing the story. So I want to remind you to check that the adaptation you're planning is a consequential one. That will improve the story in big ways. And if it's consequential, this means, would it affect a bunch of other things in the story? To answer that, really think carefully about if it's a significant, important change, or is it sort of silly and trivial? Let's say that someone was adapting Cinderella, and they decided to give her a magic leprechaun instead of a fairy godmother. And he hopped in instead of flew in. Would that be consequential? Again, to answer that, think if it would affect a bunch of other things in the story, and think whether it seems to be a significant, important change, or is it sort of silly and trivial? Unless maybe you also changed the setting and did it in Ireland and really went deep with St. Patrick's Day, just kind of having someone hop in instead of fly in and calling them a leprechaun instead of a godmother may not change much of the rest of the story. Let's take a look at this one. Too many fairy tales are about jealous siblings. In real life, classmates get jealous. So the story will be about classmates competing for a special award or title at school. What do you think? Is that one more consequential? Is that going to cause bigger changes in the story? Yes, it would end up changing some of the main characters and having a whole domino effect, because instead of being about jealous stepsisters and a ball, it's going to be about classmates at school. So that's a much more consequential change. So go ahead, turn and talk, pick someone you haven't talked to today, and make sure that they feel your major change is consequential. 2 minutes, go ahead. All right, writers, I'm going to give you a little bit more time to continue planning. I've added a new section to our chart here too to help you. Make a character with traits and wants who runs into trouble. Keep that in mind while you're planning. Make sure that you are all planned out and ready to start drafting in our next session. Make sure your story has a good character who runs into trouble and who has a problem. And if you're feeling good about all the aspects of your planning, you could even start listing out some character traits for your main characters. Off you go. stop you now. It's going to be time to get started on your first scene soon. So I want to help you with that a little bit right now. Before you can write anything, you need to realize that a short story, and a fairy tale is a short story, they're actually made up of 2 or 3 small moment stories. So let's look back at our plan for Cinderella. So here's our Cinderella plan. Cinderella is still going to be the stepsister who is treated like a servant. She loves reading. A letter comes inviting them all to a fundraiser to save the town library. The stepmother and stepsister throw the letter away because they hate the library. Cinderella cries and her fairy godmother arrives. The fairy godmother grants Cinderella's wishes so Cinderella may go to the fundraiser. Cinderella saves the library. Writers, will you look at that plan and see if you can choose 2 to 3 scenes we can write that would allow us to capture the whole story? You'll see that some of these points on the timeline can be smushed into one flowing scene, and that is often the case. Take a second to look. I'm thinking that maybe our first scene, that first small moment, should be the invitation arriving. So our Cinderella plan, my first small moment is going to be a letter comes inviting them all to a fundraiser to save the town library. And I'm thinking that Cinderella would be doing some work, then the invitation will come in the mail about the event to save the library, and that could all be one part. So now it's your turn to try. Think what the first scene in your fairy tale would be. And remember, you only get 2 to 3 scenes. So go ahead and look at your plan. Think of which one is going to be your first scene, and give me a thumbs up when you've got it. In a fairy tale, that scene usually starts with the word one. One morning, one day, one afternoon, one evening, and it jumps right in. We don't really waste time. So go ahead now and turn and talk with your partner. What is your first small scene going to be? Great job today, writers. Let's review our chart one more time. You'll see I added a new one to tell the story in 2 or 3 scenes or small moments. Once upon a time, there lived a. Set it up. But one day, unexpectedly, and so they lived happily ever after. I wonder if all of yours are going to end happily ever after. So don't forget, as we get ready to write those small moment scenes, when we are writing a fairy tale adaptation, it's important that we know the classic story and tell it often. It's in our bones that we have those really consequential changes to improve the story. That change leads to other changes, and that our characters are well developed. They've got great traits and wants, and they run into trouble. Awesome job today, writers. I can't wait to see what you do next session.